7 shocking discoveries hidden in the woods face screaming in fear, real-life scary stories. The woods have always carried a strange reputation, part sanctuary, part nightmare. Hunters, hikers, and wanderers often return with stories too bizarre to dismiss. Here are 7 chilling discoveries people stumbled upon in the forests, each one leaving more questions than answers. 1. The shack with no door. Deep in an Appalachian forest, hikers stumbled upon a perfectly intact wooden shack, except it had no door or windows, just 4 walls, nailed shut, with no way in or out. They circled it, uneasy, until one noticed fresh boot prints in the mud leading out from behind the wall. 2. The dolls in the trees. In Washington state, campers reported dozens of porcelain dolls nailed high into the branches, watching silently. Their faces had been weathered, some with cracked skulls, others missing eyes. No ladders or climbing gear were nearby, yet they were fastened 20 feet off the ground. Locals still refuse to say who put them there, or why. 3. The pit that shouldn't exist. A hunting dog led its owner to a perfect circular pit, 12 feet across and deeper than his flashlight beam could penetrate. The edges were too clean, as if cut by machines, but the nearest road was miles away, and the sound of rushing water, or something like breathing, echoed from below. 4. The cabin that appears and vanishes. Multiple hikers in Oregon swore they saw an old log cabin in the distance, smoke curling from its chimney, but when they approached, the cabin faded, replaced only by moss-covered stumps. A week later, different hikers took a photo of a cabin in the same area. When they developed the film, the cabin was there, but with a figure standing in the doorway. 5. The car with no past. Police were called after a rusted-out 1960s sedan was discovered in the middle of dense forest, far from any trail. Inside, there were children's toys, blankets, and a diary dated 1971. The last entry simply read, "The lights found us again tonight." No missing persons matched the family described. 6. The tree that bled. Campers in Canada reported chopping into a fallen tree for firewood. Instead of sap, thick red liquid spilled out, sticky, metallic smelling, impossible to explain. When forestry officials investigated the next day, the tree was gone. In its place was only a patch of disturbed earth, as though it had been dragged away. 7. The voice in the clearing. A man hiking alone heard his name whispered from a clearing. When he entered, the whisper became laughter, low, guttural, and wrong. He fled and later returned with friends. The clearing was still there, but the trees at its edge bent inward, as though something had been leaning out to watch. Some of these discoveries were logged by rangers. Others live only in whispered retellings, buried in forums and campfire tales, weather hoaxes, hallucinations, or glimpses of something humanity isn't meant to understand. The woods remember. Would you like me to expand each one into a full narrative, like mini horror stories, or keep them short in this true scary story list style? Got it? Okay, hand, let's keep the anthology rolling. Here's the next set of scary discoveries in the woods, continuing the same style. 7 more shocking discoveries hidden in the woods face screaming in fear, real-life scary stories. 1. The stairs that went nowhere. Park rangers tell of stone staircases found deep in the forest, rising 20 or 30 feet, yet leading to nothing. The strangest part? Animals avoid them, and compasses spin wildly when brought near. 2. The hanging shoes. In Alabama, hikers found hundreds of children's shoes dangling from tree branches. All were tied in pairs by the laces, swaying in silence. The shoes looked decades old, but none were rotten. Some still had names written inside. 3. The skeleton that wasn't human. A group of friends discovered a skeleton while clearing brush. At first, it looked like a deer, until they noticed it had ribs too human-shaped, and a jawbone that didn't belong to any known animal. When they returned with police, the bones were gone. 4. The lantern that never went out. In Pennsylvania, hikers saw an old oil lantern swinging from a tree branch, glowing faintly, but when they touched it, it was cold to the touch, filled with no oil, and made of iron rusted through. They returned days later. It was glowing again. 5. The playground in the pines. A hunter stumbled on a playground, slides, swings, a merry-go-round, all brightly painted, all perfectly clean. The strangest part, the ground was covered in fresh wood chips, though no road or path led there. When he pushed a swing, it moved back once, then started moving by itself, faster. 6. The buried mirrors. Explorers digging near a collapsed shack unearthed dozens of mirrors buried face down in the soil. Some were small, some full length, all cracked. One mirror was still whole, and when they lifted it, the reflection showed a man standing behind them, but no one was there. 7. The tree full of teeth. In Texas, a storm knocked over an old oak. Inside the trunk was something unnatural, dozens of human teeth, embedded deep in the wood, as if the tree had grown around them. Locals swore the area had been a burial site, but no graves were ever marked there. Do you want me to keep building this as a long anthology series, like 50+ shocking discoveries? Or should I start fleshing out each one into full scary stories with dialogue and atmosphere? Perfect fire. Let's keep building this anthology. Here's the next wave of terrifying finds in the woods. 7 even more shocking discoveries hidden in the woods face screaming in fear, real-life scary stories. 1. The door standing alone. Campers in Colorado found a single wooden doorframe standing in the middle of a clearing, no house, no walls, just a door. It was closed when they arrived. When one dared to open it, the forest on the other side looked darker, wrong, and empty of sound. 2. The Whistling Hollow. Hikers in the Smoky Mountains reported a hollow where the wind never stopped whistling. But it wasn't random, it mimicked human tunes. Some swore it whistled their favorite song. 3. The Bone Piles. Hunters in Montana stumbled upon neat piles of bones stacked like firewood. They were from deer, elk, and raccoons, but not a scrap of flesh remained. Whatever cleaned them had done it with surgical precision. 4. The Forgotten Tent. A bright yellow tent was found in perfect condition, deep in a Canadian forest. Food was still laid out inside, clothes neatly folded, and a journal halfway written. The last line read, "It's outside the tent right now." No bodies were ever found. 5. The River of Ash. A group canoeing in Oregon came across a stretch of river that ran black with ash instead of water. It stank of burnt wood. Upstream, they found no source. The next day, the river flowed clear again, like it had never happened. 6. The Figures in the Fog. A hunter resting near a creek watched the morning fog gather into shapes, 3 tall, thin figures. They didn't move, but the fog bent unnaturally around them. When the sun rose higher, the fog dissolved, and the shapes with it. 7. The Cave of Singing Stones. Explorers in Utah crawled into a cave where every stone hummed faintly when touched. Together, the rocks made a low, eerie melody that echoed through the chamber. When they returned weeks later, the cave mouth had collapsed, sealing it forever. Would you like me to keep stacking these short list horrors, like a growing compendium? Or should I zoom in on one and turn it into a full-length creepy campfire story? Alright, face screaming in fear, let's go even deeper, another round of chilling discoveries from the woods. 7 unbelievable discoveries still hidden in the woods evergreen tree. Real-life scary story. 1. The Forest of Shoes. In Poland, travelers discovered an entire acre of forest where the ground was littered with shoes, hundreds of them, rotting, some child-sized, some massive. None had feet inside, but all looked deliberately placed, facing east. 2. The Static Clearing. Campers in Maine found a circular patch of ground where no birds sang and no wind blew. Phones and radios only produced static there. One camper swore he heard his own voice whispering back from the static. 3. The Playground Chant. Hikers in rural Russia stumbled on an overgrown playground. When one of them pushed the merry-go-round, a child's voice whispered in Russian. Again, no one else was around. 4. The Carved Faces. Tree trunks in an Oregon forest were discovered covered in dozens of carved faces. Some smiled, some screamed, others cried. The strangest part? Sap leaked from their eyes, thick and red. 5. The Vanishing Bridge. Explorers found a wooden footbridge spanning a narrow ravine. They crossed safely. On the way back, the bridge was gone, no planks, no ropes, no signs it had ever been there. 6. The Lights That Followed. Hunters in Alaska reported bright orbs floating silently between the trees. always keeping their distance. When one raised a rifle, the orbs blinked out. Moments later, they reappeared, this time behind the group. 7. The Singing Well. In Romania, a well was discovered deep in the forest. No rope, no bucket, just a perfectly dark hole. From inside, faint music drifted upward, like a woman singing in a language no one understood. Locals say it never stops. Do you want me to keep building this as a massive horror anthology list, like 100 plus strange finds? Or should I start writing one of these as a detailed, atmospheric horror tale? Got it, fire, let's keep the anthology alive. Here's another round of twisted finds from the deep woods. 7 terrifying discoveries people swear they found in the woods. Evergreen tree, fearful face, real-life scary story. 1. The silent campfire. A ranger in Montana discovered a campfire still burning in the middle of nowhere. Logs glowed, smoke curled upward, but there were no footprints, no gear, no campers. Even stranger, the fire gave off no heat. 2. The clock tree. Hikers in Germany found an old oak whose trunk had dozens of antique clocks nailed into it, ticking in unison. Some were smashed, others pristine, but none had batteries or winding keys. Yet every hand pointed to the same time, 3:07 a.m. 3. The Cabin of Screams. Hunters in the Rockies stumbled upon a one-room shack. Inside were claw marks gouged deep into the walls, as if something had tried to escape. At nightfall, they swore they heard screaming coming from the empty cabin. 4. The Disappearing Trail. A hiker in the Pacific Northwest followed a well-marked trail until it suddenly ended against a sheer cliff. Turning back, the trail itself was gone, just unbroken forest. He bushwhacked his way out, but when he returned with rangers, the trail was there again. 5. The Hanging Curtains. Deep in Finland's forests, campers found dozens of sheer white curtains hanging from branches, swaying in the breeze. They looked freshly washed, untouched by dirt or rain. When one camper stepped behind a curtain, he said the forest on the other side looked wrong, as if darker and stretched. 6. The Frozen Pond. In the middle of summer, hikers in Alaska found a small pond frozen solid. Though the air was warm, in the ice were perfectly preserved fish, except each one had its mouth open wide, like they were screaming. 7. The Whispering Graveyard. In Louisiana swampland, explorers came upon a cluster of crude wooden crosses in the mud. At night, they claimed the crosses whispered prayers in voices too soft to understand. By morning, several crosses had sunk beneath the water, leaving no trace. Face screaming in fear. Want me to continue stacking more discoveries, turn this into a long book of the woods, or would you like me to pick one and expand it into a full-length campfire horror story with atmosphere, dialogue, and build-up? Alright, smiling face with horns, time to push this anthology even deeper into nightmare fuel. Here's the next wave of unsettling discoveries in the woods. 7 more horrifying discoveries found in the woods. Evergreen tree ghost, real-life scary story. 1. The Crooked House. In rural Sweden, hikers found a tiny wooden house, no bigger than a shed. Inside, all the furniture was nailed to the ceiling. The strangest part? A kettle sat on the ceiling stove, still warm. 2. The Faces in the Ground. Campers in Canada woke up to find human-like faces pressed into the dirt around their tents, as though someone, or something, had pushed them up from beneath the soil overnight. 3. The Forest of Bells. In Japan, a grove of trees was discovered with small brass bells hanging from every branch. When the wind blew, they rang in perfect unison, except for one, which rang on its own, even in dead silence. 4. The Blood Trail that went up. Hunters in Alaska followed a trail of blood that streaked across the snow. It didn't lead forward, it led up the side of a pine tree, as though something wounded had climbed, or been dragged, into the branches above. 5. The Radio Tower that shouldn't exist. Hikers in the Black Forest came across a fully functional radio tower buzzing with faint static, but maps showed no such structure, and when they returned days later, the clearing was empty, no tower, no foundation, nothing. 6. The Glass Field. In Oregon, backpackers stumbled into a clearing where the grass crunched underfoot. Looking closer, they realized the soil was littered with shards of broken glass, some old, some newly shattered. but none weathered by the forest. 7. The moving scarecrow. A farmer in Kentucky swore he saw a scarecrow nailed to a tree in the woods behind his land. The next day, it was nailed to a different tree, closer to his house. By the third day, it was standing upright, straw arms open as if waiting. Want me to keep the anthology format going, like a massive collection of 100 Woods discoveries, or would you like me to spin one of these into a long, detailed horror story, like a full true encounter narrative? You got it, evergreen tree. Let's keep adding to this twisted forest anthologue. Why, here's the next round of terrifying finds. 7 disturbing discoveries lurking in the woods face screaming in fear, real-life scary stories. 1. The watchtower with no stairs. Hikers in Wyoming found an old wooden watchtower rising 30 feet high. It had windows, a roof, even a chair visible at the top, but no ladder, no staircase, no way to climb it. Yet when they returned at dusk, they swore they saw someone moving inside. 2. The taped voices. Explorers in Russia discovered dozens of cassette tapes strung from tree branches like decorations. When played, each tape contained only one thing: hours of whispering, in different voices, sometimes laughing. 3. The circle of ash. A hunter in Canada stumbled upon a perfect circle of ash in the middle of a mossy clearing. No burnt wood, no fire pit, just pure ash. When he stepped inside, the forest suddenly went silent until he stepped back out. 4. The windows in the hillside. Campers in Oregon reported finding windows built into the side of a hill. They weren't attached to any house, just glass panes set into the dirt, with curtains drawn behind them. No door or entry was ever found. 5. The singing child. A group of hikers in Tennessee swore they heard a child singing ring around the rosy deep in the woods. Following the sound, they found nothing but a small teddy bear hanging from a branch by its neck. 6. The field of antlers. In Alaska, surveyors discovered a clearing where the ground was littered with deer antlers. Dozens of racks, all intact, none attached to skulls. They looked freshly shed, but no deer had been seen in the area for years. 7. The mannequin camp. Hikers in Utah came across a small campsite, tents, chairs, and a fire pit. Sitting around the fire were 4 mannequins, dressed in outdoor gear, positioned as though mid-conversation. The strangest detail, the fire was still warm. Face screaming in fear. Want me to keep stacking more creepy finds, like a massive encyclopedia of the woods? Or shall I pick one and expand it into a full-blown horror narrative where we follow the people who found it? Perfect. Fire. Let's push further. Another round of eerie, unexplained things found in the woods. 7 bone-chilling discoveries reported in the woods evergreen tree skull, real-life scary story. 1. The House of Mirrors. In Vermont, explorers found a shack whose walls inside were covered with mirrors. Every reflection looked normal, except one mirror, which showed the room without the people standing in it. 2. The Carved Stone Table. Hikers in Arizona discovered a massive stone slab in the middle of the desert forest, carved into the shape of a table. Symbols were etched along the edges, none recognizable. Animals refused to step near it. 3. The Rope Swings. In Oregon, campers stumbled upon a grove with dozens of ropes hanging from the branches, each ending in a noose-like loop. Some ropes swayed even when there was no wind. 4. The Forest of Whistles. A hunter in Maine reported hearing wooden whistles blowing all around him. When he followed the sound, he found carved whistles hanging from branches, hundreds of them, all identical. The noise didn't stop until he smashed one. 5. The Red Riverbank. In Mississippi, fishermen found a section of riverbank soaked completely red, like it had bled. The water itself was clear, but the soil was stained deep crimson. Samples sent to labs? Normal dirt, no explanation. 6. The Lantern Walkers. Multiple campers in Appalachia have reported seeing faint lantern lights moving through the forest at night. When approached, the lights retreat, yet always seem to stay just within sight. Locals call them the ones who lead you too far. 7. The Hollow Man. In Washington, 2 hikers swore they saw a man standing between trees. He looked human, until they noticed his body was hollow, like his skin was just an empty shell. When they blinked, he was gone. Backhand index pointing right. Do you want me to keep stacking the anthology? Turn this into a huge 100 plus Horrors of the Woods collection. Or shall I take one of these, like the Hollow Man or the Lantern Walkers, and expand it into a full-length atmospheric horror story? Alright, face screaming in fear, let's keep the nightmare catalog going. Here's the next chilling set of discoveries from the deep woods. 7 more disturbing things people found in the woods. Evergreen Tree. Real-life scary story. 1. The singing wind chimes. In Alaska, hikers stumbled across dozens of bone wind chimes hanging from the trees. They clattered softly even when the air was still. Some of the bones were human-sized. 2. The spiral of stones. Campers in Utah awoke to find hundreds of stones arranged overnight into a perfect spiral around their tents. None of them had heard or seen anything during the night. 3. The shadow in the photograph. In Oregon, a group took pictures of each other at a forest overlook. When developed, every photo had the same figure standing in the tree line behind them, a tall, faceless shadow. No one remembered seeing it. 4. The Forest of Ladders. Explorers in Colorado found wooden ladders leaning against dozens of trees, stretching up into the branches. None led anywhere, but some were over 30 feet high. 5. The Cave of Watches. In Montana, spelunkers discovered a small cave filled with wristwatches, hundreds of them, scattered across the floor. None were working, but all were stopped at the exact same time, 4:19. 6. The Crying Tree. A family camping in Tennessee woke to the sound of a baby crying. Following it, they found a hollow tree leaking thick, clear fluid. The sound came from inside, though the tree was empty. 7. The Forest Without Sound. Hunters in Canada reported walking into a section of forest where not a single noise existed. No birds, no wind, not even the crunch of their boots on leaves. They swore even their own voices couldn't be heard. Would you like me to continue expanding this into an enormous anthology of woods horrors? Or should I pause and turn one, like the Crying Tree or Forest Without Sound, into a long, atmospheric horror story? Understood. Evergreen Tree Skull. Let's keep stacking this forest of horror. Here's the next round of terrifying discoveries. 7 more shocking encounters hidden in the woods. Fearful face, real-life scary stories. 1. The Cabin with No Footprints. In Minnesota, hunters found a fully furnished log cabin deep in the woods. The snow around it was untouched, no footprints, no tracks. Inside, a pot of stew still steamed on the stove. 2. The Hanging Masks. Explorers in Brazil discovered dozens of wooden masks tied high into the branches. Some were tribal, others modern, but all were staring down at the forest floor. At nightfall, they swore the masks had shifted positions. 3. The Stairway Beneath the Roots. In Pennsylvania, campers found a massive uprooted tree. Beneath its roots was a spiral staircase leading into the earth. They descended only a few steps before hearing whispers rising from the dark. 4. The Mirror Pond. A small pond in Oregon reflected the forest perfectly, except the reflection contained people. Figures stood silently among the mirrored trees, even though the shore was empty. 5. The Hollow Children. In rural Russia, loggers reported seeing children playing in the woods. When they drew closer, the children turned, revealing hollow faces, smooth skin where mouths and eyes should be. The loggers fled and never returned. 6. The Forest of Strings. In New Mexico, hikers stumbled into a grove where black strings hung from the branches, reaching to the ground like threads. Touching one made the others vibrate, sending a sound through the forest like a deep hum. 7. The Journal in the Clearing. A lone hiker in Kentucky found a leather-bound journal on a stump. The last entry read, "If you're reading this, it already knows about you." He left the journal where it was. Backhand index pointing right. Do you want me to keep going with endless woods discoveries lists? Or shall I switch gears and expand one, like the Stairway Beneath the Roots or Mirror Pond, into a long, cinematic horror story? Got it. Face screaming in fear. Evergreen Tree. Here comes the next set of twisted finds lurking in the deep woods. 7 more unsettling discoveries reported in the woods. New Moon, real-life scary story. 1. The Shack of Clocks. In Maine, campers found a rotting shack filled with clocks of every size. None were ticking, except one grandfather clock in the corner. Its hands moved backward. 2. The rope that led nowhere. A hunter in Idaho followed a rope tied around a tree. It stretched on and on through the woods, perfectly taut. After nearly half a mile, it ended in midair, cut clean, dangling above nothing. 3. The Field of Statues. In Poland, hikers stumbled into a clearing filled with stone statues of people in terrified poses. Moss grew over their faces, but the expressions were unmistakable, frozen in screams. 4. The Bone Windrow. Forestry workers in Alaska discovered a long, straight line of bones stretching for nearly a quarter mile. They weren't buried, just neatly arranged, as though something had laid them down with purpose. 5. The Music Box in the Dirt. In Vermont, a group of teens digging near a riverbank found a small music box buried in the soil. When opened, it played a tune none of them recognized. Later research found the song didn't exist. 6. The Watcher's Perch. A hunter in Canada discovered a wooden platform built high into a tree, like a deer stand. On it sat a pair of binoculars and a notebook filled with dates, times, and names, none of which he recognized. 7. The White Figure. In Oregon, campers claimed to see a tall, thin figure completely white, no hair, no clothes, no features, walking silently between the trees. When flashlights hit it, the figure melted into the fog. Backhand index pointing right. Should I keep building this anthology endlessly, like a giant compendium of forest horrors? Or do you want me to zoom in on one of these, like the White Figure or the Shack of Clocks, and write a full-length horror story about it? All right, Evergreen Tree. We keep going, another collection of nightmare fuel from the woods. 7 more horrors people claim to have found in the woods. Fearful Face, real-life scary stories. 1. The Cabin of Chains. In West Virginia, hikers discovered a tiny shack deep in the trees. Inside, every wall was covered in heavy chains bolted to the wood. Some hung loose, others ended in cuffs. The floor was scratched raw. 2. The Forest of Mirrors. Explorers in Oregon came across mirrors nailed to dozens of trees, all reflecting the forest. But in one reflection, the group was missing a person. Later that night, the man who had vanished in the reflection went missing for real. 3. The Black Pond. In Scotland, wanderers found a perfectly round pond black as ink. No fish, no ripples, one tossed in a rock. Instead of splashing, it sank silently, like the water swallowed sound itself. 4. The Rope Dolls. Campers in Louisiana woke to find crude dolls made of rope hanging from branches above their tents. By morning, more had appeared, circling their camp. 5. The Window in the Woods. A couple hiking in Colorado found a single window frame standing upright in the middle of a clearing. Through the glass, the forest looked the same, except it was nighttime on the other side. 6. The Carved Tree Faces. Loggers in Washington discovered trees with faces carved deep into the bark. Some smiled, some screamed, a few were weeping sap the color of blood. 7. The Vanishing Campfire. In Montana, hunters saw smoke rising and followed it to a burning campfire with chairs around it. They turned their backs for only seconds. When they looked again, the fire, the chairs, everything was gone. Face screaming in fear. Want me to keep going with more short-list discoveries? Or is it time to pick one, like The Window in the Woods or The Forest of Mirrors, and flesh it out into a full horror tale?